Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Morning, everybody, and the beginning of our Daylong on Nibbidā, or Disenchantment. So today, because this is a word that shows up a bunch in the suttas, I'm going to go that extra mile to have visual aids. But of course, this creates a lot of opportunities for something to go wrong. So we will just see how it goes. So you can all see that, I hope. And here we are. Here's the word we're working with, Nibbidā. And this gets translated several different ways. One of the first ways it was translated was disenchantment. And this is, not a bad, like, literal, but I'll actually get into where it's not quite on point. Disillusionment is one that Bhante Sujato uses on Sutta Central. So if that's your go-to for where to read the suttas, then you'll probably see that word, disillusionment. And then revulsion actually shows up in a number of places. And this, I'm not sure if this is Bhikkhu Bodhi or it was, I forget, it's Jnana Tiloka or Jnanamoli. He picked up the thread of translating the Majjhima Nikaya from a previous monk, and I'm not sure who preferred revulsion. But Nibbidā, which often is like the state of disenchantment, is a form of nibbindati, which is the verb. So we have noun and we have verb. And as a verb, it's one becomes disenchanted, or one becomes disillusioned, or one becomes disgusted with, and . And so, whereas we see Nibbidā in some places, we'll see nibbindati in others, depending on whether the Buddha is talking about this as a state, or he's talking about somebody, because of the practice that they're doing, because of the way that they're looking at things, they become this. Yeah? And so this is a word, and this is an important word. And probably we all have the same difficulty with this word, yeah? It seems like it should be a verb. And moreover, if you're anything like me, when you read a sutta like the Anatta Sutta, yeah, the discourse on not self, there's a whole bunch of stuff like, are things permanent or impermanent? We're like, impermanent. Are things suffering or not suffering? We say, yeah, they're suffering. And are they self or not self? We're like, oh, they can't possibly be a self. And then the Buddha says, well, seeing thus, the wise disciple becomes disenchanted. And we're like, okay, that's the goal? Okay, then that's what I'll do. And so we go and we sit down and we're like, okay, there are these 5 aggregates, there are these 6 sense bases. I'm supposed to be disenchanted with them, right? So why don't I just do that? I'll skip the other stuff, I'll become disenchanted. But we find that's often a little insincere, right? It's a little hard to do. As a verb, it's in the passive for a reason, yeah? We don't do disenchantment in the same way we do right action, or we do right speech, or we do right livelihood. Disenchantment is something that's going to come about as a culmination, we can say, of the work that we are doing. So in some ways, this is how we're going to end up looking at disenchantment, yeah? We'll have the Noble Eightfold Path, which is all of the things that we do, all of the things we cultivate. Right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right samadhi. These are all good things and we cultivate them. But very interestingly, in the Noble Eightfold Path, you don't have liberation. You don't have the knowledge and vision of freedom. It's not in there. But actually, the Buddha did talk about the Noble Eightfold Path as a Noble Tenfold Path. And in the Noble Tenfold Path, we have these extra two factors, right knowledge and right knowledge and vision of release. Yeah, so that's where we find disenchantment. Namely, all of the stuff we do and cultivate and build up leads to disenchantment. And this is kind of the aspects, the product, the culmination of our knowledge of things as they are. And this leads to dispassion, cessation, calm, direct knowledge, self-awakening, nibbana. And this little ditty here, this is probably where we've often seen disenchantment. This little string of words shows up in a lot of places, and it's kind of, the Buddha could pull it out at a moment's notice, and he's like, this is what we're doing, this is what we're working towards. The commentaries go so far as to say that there's a cutoff, and it happens right here. So all of the things we do culminate in disenchantment, and then this is the path. This is path consciousness, or the beginning of enlightenment. And that, somewhere in here, I couldn't quite figure out where they were saying it is the fruit, where we're done with that part of the work. Yeah. So disenchantment is not enlightenment, but it is the thing right before enlightenment. It's sort of the gateway to enlightenment. So it's to just put it in perspective, this is a culmination event. This is a good thing, and it's good to know what we're working towards, but to also set our sights in a realistic framework. The stuff we're doing should lead to disenchantment. And so we look at what we're doing in order to understand the state. And when we understand the state, we understand why what we're doing should lead there. And one of the early ways that I heard about disenchantment, besides in the suttas, was a teacher, Longpur Liam, who was a teacher in the Ajahn Chah tradition and the Thai forest tradition. He was once asked by a group of monks, like, okay, could you look into our minds or something and tell us, like, what is the best meditation technique we should be using? Or something along the lines of, I'm trying this, is this a good meditation technique? And rather than give them individual instructions, Longpur Liam said, like, look, just look at your meditation technique and ask, is this leading to disenchantment? Is this leading to Nibbidā? If you say yes, then it is a good technique. And so in a way, this is a fantastic metric for any of our practices in the holy life. Is like, is it leading to this sense of disenchantment, of seeing things as they are? Well, then it's working. That's the way it should be going. But if we say no, we're like, yeah, no, I'm going into Reddit, and I'm getting in these fiery debates with people about self and not self, and jhana and not jhana, and all of these things. We're like, well, maybe you've got to adapt your technique a little bit. It doesn't sound like it's leading to disenchantment. You might want to tweak that one. So now, wanting to share. Oh, that's why. So let's look at one place where this is the case. Yeah, this comes from Digha Nikaya 9. So in Digha Nikaya is the long discourses. So this is a very long discourse. And I scroll up to anything that will give you a sense of time and place. It would take a week to scroll back down. This is towards the end of or somewhere in the middle of the sutta, which is many, many pages long. But the gist of it is Buddhapada is a guy who comes up to the Buddha, and he's trying to get the Buddha to take a stance on something. Yeah, and he's got this whole list of things that he's like, if the Buddha would just take a stance on one of these things, then I would know what it is he stands for. What is his doctrine all about? He's basically saying, hey, look, you're a philosopher. I need you to philosophize about something. Tell me what's right and what's wrong. And he gets kind of upset when the Buddha refuses to take a stance about any of these things. Like, is the cosmos finite? Is it infinite? Are the soul and the body one thing, or are they another? Do you exist after death, or do you not exist after death, or do you both exist and not exist after death? In the modern day, we probably don't think of ourselves as making these demands of our teachers, but it's really not that different. We use different words, we use different ideas, but a lot of these things are kind of universal. We'll go to our teachers and be like, look, should I do it this way or should I do it that way? And sometimes our teacher would just be like, yeah, you do it the right way. And we're like, look, why are you not saying one or the other? Sometimes teacher will understand that there's this paradox. And it's like, look, if I say do this, then when it's appropriate to do that, you won't do that. And if I say do that, then when it's appropriate to do this, you won't do this. So instead, I'm just not going to take a stance. And in some cases, especially when it comes to views, this is the wise course of action. Taking a stance on any view means that some of the time it's going to be the wrong view. And so the right view is actually to not take a permanent stance on views, but to see views as, yeah, impermanent suffering and not self. But Potappada kind of comes right out and he says, like, look, why are you not taking a stance on one of these things? And the Buddha responds, because they are not conducive to the goal. They are not conducive to the Dhamma, are not basic to the holy life. They don't lead to disenchantment, to dispassion, to cessation, to calm, direct knowledge, self-awakening, and unbinding. That's why I haven't expounded them. So then Potappada asks, what has the Blessed One expounded? And the Buddha says, I have expounded, this is dukkha. This is the origin of dukkha. This is the cessation of dukkha. And this is the path of practice leading to the cessation of dukkha. And he's asked, well, why did you expound these? He says, because they are conducive to the goal, conducive to the Dhamma, and basic to the holy life. They will lead to disenchantment, dispassion, cessation, calm, direct knowledge, self-awakening, and to Nibbana. So we are building ourselves a kind of bracket here, or a kind of system of understanding where disenchantment lies. There are going to be things that lead to disenchantment. Yeah, so disenchantment is built on top of these things. And then there are things that disenchantment leads to, namely enlightenment. Yeah, the culmination of the path, all of the things that are talked about in terms of knowledge and vision of release, light, insight, awakening, peace, all of these good things. Yeah. And in the Anguttara Nikaya now, so this is the very first sutta in the chapter of the tens, though the first couple of suttas in this chapter of the tens all kind of cover this. But we've got an instance of where the Buddha actually lays out how this takes place, yeah? So we haven't gotten super specific on what Nibbidā is, but to try to bracket it, we can see what leads to it, what's going to culminate in it. And if we get very clear on what the preceding conditions are for disenchantment, we'll start to see why it is it arises in a particular way that it does. Yeah. So Venerable Ananda, who's our buddy and kind of the example of the seeker on the path, who's always coming to the Buddha with great questions, goes up to the Buddha, sits down, and asks him, what is the purpose of sila? Yeah. And the Buddha says, having no regrets is the purpose of sila. So sila is not just for merit, or just for a pat on the back, or just, for not getting in trouble. It also produces an effect on the mind. And this effect is we don't have regrets. And the regrets and guilt weigh down the mind. We don't have them, we're not weighed down. So then Ananda, because he never leaves enough alone, he says, well, what's the purpose of having no regrets? The Buddha says joy is the purpose of having no regrets. And this word joy is pamoja, which get into a little bit of the Pali, is the same root as the word mudita. Doesn't look like it, yes, but it is. And so pamoja is used a bunch in the suttas, actually, and it's not a jhana factor. It's not piti and sukha, but it's considered a good thing. It's the kind of delight and happiness that comes from, you know, being free or being happy, being carefree in a way. It's so joy is a good translation. But then we have, well, what's the purpose of joy? And the Buddha says piti. Yeah. And we know that this is a jhana factor. It's a rapture and a delight that comes from seclusion from the hindrances. Yeah. But then what is the purpose of piti? Well, it's tranquility or passaddhi. Yeah, and this is one of the factors of enlightenment, tranquility. Yeah, a real calm and ease of the body, a lack of turbulence. Well, what's the purpose of that? Ananda, you know, bless your heart. Well, the purpose of that is bliss or sukha. You know, sukha is another jhana factor, which is sort of a very seated, happy, blissful, often felt in the body kind of rootedness of just pure happiness and not needing anything. And what's the purpose of sukha, of bliss? Well, then we're talking about samadhi. And now most of us think that samadhi is for pamoja, you know, joy, piti, rapture, sukha, bliss. But the Buddha is saying, well, actually, those things lead to samadhi. Yeah, when the mind is internally stable, happy, and energized, then it becomes composed. Yeah. But then what is the purpose of samadhi? And this is immersion here, but this is samadhi. Yeah. Well, the purpose of samadhi is for truly knowing and seeing. Yata bhuta jnana dasana. So it's a mouthful. That's the Pali language for you. But yata is thus. Bhuta is the thing or the way it is. Jnana is knowledge. And dasana is seeing. So seeing something and knowing it as it is. That's what that whole compound means. And this, what is the purpose of truly knowing and seeing something as it is? Disillusionment and dispassion. So we have Nibbidā and we have viraga, dispassion. And these two are often seen together, but they're always seen in this order. It's never dispassion and then disillusionment. It's, you know, our Nibbidā, our disenchantment, and then that leading to dispassion. So then we have, well, what is the benefit of disillusionment and dispassion? It is knowledge and vision of freedom. So that final factor of the tenfold path. And our disenchantment is leading to dispassion and is leading to knowledge and freedom. So we have two kinds of knowing and seeing here, which are very significant. The first one is we're knowing and seeing things as they are. And this can only be accomplished when our mind is free from the hindrances, is stable, is energized and bright. We're going to see things as they actually are without any bias. Yeah, so be like, and significantly, we're going to be able to see the drawbacks. We're going to be able to see the characteristics, the impermanence, the suffering, the not self of these things. That will lead us to a state of disenchantment. And when we have this disenchantment, we'll get to dispassion. Now, because of disenchantment and dispassion, we will actually be able to understand nibbana. We'll be able to understand what is beyond things, what is beyond constructions, what is beyond acquisitions, yeah? What is beyond sankharas. What could it possibly be? Well, we couldn't even surmise what it could be like to be free of these things and to be in a state undefiled by these things without having seen the things that are holding us back as they truly are, yeah, and arriving at a state of acceptance of that. So I threw the book at you. Everybody's still with me? Yeah, well, some of you have been doodling, some of you have been taking notes. Great, great. So what is disenchantment? Did anybody have an epiphany? Well, we haven't really narrowed it down completely, have we? And this is what the pāli canon is like. It'll tell us work towards this thing, and then it'll say, well, you'll know it when you get there. Okay, we got a being tired of stuff arising and ceasing all the time. Yeah, okay, this is it's not bad. It's a working definition. So being tired of stuff arising and ceasing all the time. I think this is probably a much better translation than revulsion. Yeah. And I will get into why, but before I do this, I want to say I sometimes make light of the way that translators retranslate things. They hear somebody else's translation and they decide that's not quite right. And so they come out with their own translation. And this actually keeps monks fed. This gives us something to do, and it makes us able to create books to fill libraries. And it's great fun. Yeah. So this is all to say, if you disagree with me, fine, use whatever word you want. And I covered all the different translations of this because no matter what you decide this word means and what it's referring to, you will encounter other interpretations of this word. Knowing the word Nibbidā gives you some context. You'll be like, what, revulsion? They should, and you go and you look it up. It's like, oh, he said Nibbidā. I know what Nibbidā is, and you're good. Yeah. But we're going to cover a little subtlety of the word in a way of trying to define it. So this little chalkboard, we'll call this. So Nibbidā, again, is some for the pāli scholars. Nibbidā actually comes from the verb vindati, yeah, and it has a prefix of ni. So in Pāli does not like the transition of ni into a v. So it turns that into a b. And it even doesn't like that. It doesn't like a nivindity. It prefers that it doubles it. So from that, we have nib. And one famous nib is nibbana, which comes from ni and vana. Yeah. So that's nirvana, you know, that's it's the good thing. That's what we're all working towards. Yeah, nibbana. So this prefix ni has its own meaning. It means to be without something, yeah, to not have something. And we see this prefix arise in a couple of places, like in the word nirodha, which we translate as cessation, but which really means non-arising. No root of something. Something's not coming up. Yeah, so it's totally without something. Or nibbana, which vana means to blow out or to cool or to extinguish. So it's completely without fire. It's completely gone out. Yeah, it's completely extinguished is what the word means. So a very subtle point of English that only like really, everybody who's like a native English speaker knows this rule, but doesn't know that they know the rule, because it's a very subtle thing that we don't have to think about to follow. But there's a difference between dis and un, yeah? And this is why disenchantment is not quite what we're going for, yeah? So dis means to be separated, and Pāli actually has a prefix which means dis, and it's v. So in viraga, to be dispassionate or to be free of passion. Passion exists, but you're suddenly freed from it, separated from it. In vimutti, it's a form of freedom where you're freed from the defilements. Viveka is seclusion, so you're freed from interruptions, from distractions. Visankata is a synonym for nibbana. It's a synonym for the ultimate freedom, which is the unconstructed, the not constructed, or really, literally freedom from constructions. Yeah, there are constructions, there are sankharas, but nibbana is that which is free from it. It's kind of off on the side, like looking in, like, yeah, I probably don't want that. Yeah. So if this was vivindati or vibindati, then we could use dis. But in this case, it's not that we're separated from something, it's that it's not arising in the first place. And so we'd be better off saying unenchantment. You heard it here first, folks. But now, what is the enchantment part? Vindati is actually a pretty, it is a curious word. I bet if you were given 100 guesses, you wouldn't guess what this verb is. It's actually the verb defined. Yeah. In the way that we discover something or come upon something or come to know something. Yeah. And in certain contexts, the Buddha talks about craving as that which is seeking. Yeah, it's like the monkey leaping from tree to tree in search of fruit, or the mind seeking now here, now there, ever in search of fresh delights. Yeah. So disenchantment, in a way, the verb vindati is pointing at this nature of seeking, but in its ni form, it is the end of seeking. It is the end of finding. It is the end of discovering. It is the end of and delighting in acquiring. Yeah. And this gives us a slightly, what, how do we even translate that? Well, we'd use the words that work. Yeah, we don't want the spell check to always kick it back and say, look, unenchantment is not a word. Come up with a better one. But maybe uninterested, unenthused. I don't know, and maybe this is something to look at. So the important concept that we're trying to get is this is not that we're trying to separate ourselves from our enchantment, is that we've reached a place where the enchantment is simply not arising. And so now we're going to segue into our sort of meditation for the morning. And what we'll do is we will I'll start just with a little sort of mental framework. And as many of you know, this is part of what we call meditation, but it's not the samadhi part. Yeah, I often give like little mental exercises to try something out. The reason I do this is because this is actually an important part of the path. Yeah, samadhi is great, but samadhi also has to be employed. Yeah, when we get peace of mind, this should give us a window onto something that we are otherwise taking way too seriously or looking at through our perception with a bias. But when we settle, we can just look at that thing and be like, it's really not what I'm making it out to be. It's kind of different from what I'm making it out to be. It's much simpler. It's much more straightforward. And it's not quite as great as I'm making it out to be. It's not worth suffering over, is what we often discover when we come at something from the mind of samadhi. Yeah. So I'll give this little framework, but maybe in a way that will seed investigating the state through the day. Yeah. So we'll run through this little mental exercise, and then as we normally do, we'll open it up and we'll do the schedule. We'll sit and walk until 11 a.m. 12 Eastern. I need a little help on this one. The time zones really get me. So until 12 p.m. Eastern time. Okay, great, thank you. Right? I don't know how you're getting the fireworks, but okay. It's every time you do a thumbs up. There we go. So when you all reach that level of practice, that just giving a thumbs up will cause fireworks. Yeah. Now, okay. So with that, we'll settle, and then just I'll give this exercise, and then we'll just kind of trail off into meditation. And as I suggest, you'll have an opportunity if you'd like to sit and walk, maybe decide on the half hour. Yeah. So it's sort of scheduled and sort of up to what you feel is right at the time. So as we'll take a minute and sort of let in just the sensations of this moment. What are you hearing? What's the temperature in the room? What things are in motion? Then where are you? How is the body set up? What is your posture? Can you feel your breath? It doesn't really matter where you feel it. There is a knowledge that you are breathing. And this is a calming thought, because you don't have to think about it to be breathing. Therefore, breathing happens without thought. And therefore, thoughts are not necessary for life to continue. We can maybe get a sense of how time is passing fluidly, seamlessly all around us. And within us as well. So now, what does it mean to be unenchanted? What does it mean to be unenthused, unseduced by the world? It can be a hard thing to aim for complete unenchantment with all things. But I would suspect, if we think about it, there's probably something somewhere that we're already fairly unenchanted with. And it's good if this is a simple thing. This doesn't have to be like very esoteric theoretical exercise. Yeah. Maybe something that you know that people in the world get very excited about, and you know from your own experience you do not. And if it's a simple object, all the better. And this can be individual to you, but I suggest maybe just deciding on one and then sticking with it rather than jumping around. So maybe it's food. Maybe you know that there are people in the world who get excited about food, but you could take it or leave it. Or you know that there are people in the world who get excited about clothing. There are people in the world who get excited about haircuts or about shoes or about nice cars. People who get excited about times of the year, places they want to go on vacation. They get excited about political parties. People get excited about hobbies. You maybe find one thing where you can say, I get caught up on things from time to time, but there's this one thing that I just really don't care much about. And this is a good starting place for us, as often just to survive in the world, we have to have things that we don't obsess about. We have to have things that are just safe, and we can say, you know what, I'll take whatever I can get. So think about this object and think about how nice it is that you don't care too much about it. You don't read magazines about it or theorize about it. You know that people get excited about it, but you kind of spend your money elsewhere. Yeah. Now, this is a sense of what it is to be unenchanted, but we want to take this a step further because true unenchantment is going to come from knowing and seeing the thing as it is. And if we really poke and pry, we will probably find that while we don't go seeking this thing, if we got a really nice version of it just handed to us, we would probably still feel some manner of delight. And this is where we want to stop and investigate, because true disenchantment, true unenchantment, true not being excited about something has to also include not needing it when we're given it in its seemingly purest form. We have to be able to always see it in a balanced way. So this will be different depending on what you've got, whether it be food or vacations or clothing. For me, when I thought about it, I thought of cars. And for me, these are metal boxes on wheels. I've never been able to tell them apart. I've never cared much. To me, they just seem way too expensive. Yet in my life, I've seen from time to time a nice shiny one goes by, and I'm like, oh, that looks nice. Or somebody gets out of one and they seem happy. I'm like, well, that must have felt really good to go vroom vroom down the highway. And I feel a bit of mudita for them. And maybe somewhere deep in my psyche, you'd be like, well, it'd be nice to go vroom vroom too. But in order to have this full experience of Nibbidā, take one step back and look at the object and try to think of three conditions whereby even if something was really nice, if you saw it, you would still not want it. So say for the car example, I think there's never been a car that doesn't need gas or power, doesn't need fuel. Yeah, so it's always eating through its fuel. I think there's never been a car that was free. Yeah, these are valuable things. It's always expensive. And there's never been a car that's not dangerous. It doesn't weigh a lot and go very fast. And think about the thing that you're cultivating unenchantment towards. And come up with your list of 3 things. It's expensive. It's heavy. It's hard to protect. It breaks down. And these are your 3 conditions that you set up beforehand. And you say, no matter what kind of this object I'm presented with, even an object like a vacation, maybe you get excited about a vacation if you win a free vacation down to, you know, Gulf of Mexico or something, and you think, oh, hurricanes. Oh, hurricanes. Yeah. And these conditions, they're not really a bias. It's trying to poke through and see something as it is. There's no thing in the world, no thing in samsara that doesn't have downsides, that doesn't have drawbacks, that doesn't bring with it a sense of burden or trade off. You win this great vacation, but you have to find somebody to feed your cat. You get this new car, but you have nowhere to park it. You get these new shoes, but you're terrified to step in a puddle with them. And see if you can come up with just 3 simple things, 3 simple criteria where that you can then apply to any example of this object. And be like, there will never be a car that is not dangerous. And your mind now, if there's any underlying tendency, your mind might want to push back a little. And this is where we make the important effort to apply this characteristic and say, no, I mean, where, how? Your mind will say, oh, surely they can come up with a car that's not dangerous. And you say, that's silly. That's pointless. You're like, maybe in a million years, there'll be something that some alien race calls a car that instantly transports from place to place and isn't dangerous in any way. But I won't be alive to see it. Who cares? In terms of reality, the reality right in front of us, this is basically as true as can be. And moreover, it's useful so that when we see a car, we know, oh, this has to be used skillfully. This can hurt people. Yeah? And so taking our criteria and applying it to the object. And now maybe we can start to feel Nibbidā arising. And this is going to be the more real experience of Nibbidā, where the underlying tendency starts to break down. A sense arises, maybe a knowledge or a vision or a voice in our head that says, you know what? These things are just not worth it. And if you do see this for yourself, then you have seen something that nobody can make you see or nobody can force on you. You're seeing something that comes through skillfully applying your mind. You're seeing, in essence, the 4 noble truths, that things in samsara do lead to suffering. And so this also comes with a sense of freedom. And this is the pamodja, the joy. This is piti, the rapture. This is sukha, the happiness. This is passaddhi, the tranquility. Namely, once you can see about this object, this food, this clothing, this vacation, this car, these shoes, whatever it is, once you can see about all of them, and before you even look, before you even find one along your path, you already know it has drawbacks. You find the mind starting to settle and just not even look for the thing. And you can maybe tap into the knowledge that even if somebody offered you one, you could just shrug and say, you know what? I don't even need it. And imagine yourself walking away from it. And that this is freedom, release, the end of any suffering that could be associated with that thing. The cessation, the non-arising of any troubles that would arise if you associated with that thing. So now we'll continue the meditation period. And if that's enough for you, then you can go to your meditation object. But maybe there's something there that you want to keep looking at a little bit, or maybe you want to try another object and be like, well, what is it? What would it be like to be able to walk away from a perfectly good blank and to not care, to not need it? What would that sense of unenchantment, unillusionment really be like? How would it be happy? How would it be free? And so this is what we'll keep working with.